With that, Co-Chair McLean, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Patterson. She's our Assistant Superintendent of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment, and she's here to start the third section of today, which is our STEM and CTE-related grant and programs. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Co-Chairs Frederick and McLean and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Jennifer Patterson, Assistant Superintendent of the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment, and I'm delighted to be here today as we continue to highlight investments in Oregon students. It's easy to talk about STEM and CTE, easy for me to light up in talking about it because I've seen so many Oregon students over my career in schools and districts have an opportunity to really get their hands on and their minds alive through STEM and CTE. So I've seen firsthand countless examples of how much of a difference and an impact these investments make every day for the lives of students. So thanks to the intentional investment Oregon's made over the past decade, we have significantly expanded career and technical education, CTE, as well as science, technology, engineering, and mathematics programming, also referred to as STEM. So what I'll talk about today are really how STEM and CTE-related grants work together to ensure that students graduate high school and that they bring with them the skills they need to pursue post-secondary education, to secure competitive high-wage jobs, and that they're able to connect their personal passion and interests with a larger purpose and meaning in their lives. STEM and CTE, while distinct in many ways, are similar in that they're proven to generate similar benefits. They accelerate, they deepen, and they expand student learning. They increase engagement and attendance, and they lead to higher outcomes in high school and beyond. So we know there's a real need for STEM and CTE. More than 75% of fast-growing occupations require STEM skills. That's true now than perhaps more than ever before. Even our educators are having to become incredibly skilled in digital interface. We know that in the past 10 years, growth in STEM jobs was 3 times as fast as growth in non-STEM jobs. And we know we have still a lot of work to do in Oregon. While we're really proud of our growing graduation rates that continue year after year to show increase, we know that we have yet to ensure that all of Oregon students graduate from high school and leave ready for career or post-secondary education. So what we know is that the investment we've made so far in STEM and CTE is paying off. We know that STEM is having a far-reaching influence in Oregon. To date, more than 43,000 students in Oregon participate in hub-directed programs, and more than 5,000 of Oregon's educators participated in STEM Hub's professional learning programs. Equally exciting and impressive is the impact that secondary CTE is having to on-time high school graduation and higher annual earnings. We know those are very positively correlated. And we know that students who concentrated in a CTE program of study were 25% more likely to graduate high school in 4 years. Equally impressive graduation rates for CTE concentrators is 93%. And we see significant impact for our American Indian, Alaska Native students who experience around a 59% graduation rate, but those who participate and concentrate in CTE graduate at an 83% rate. So we know that CTE concentration also is positively correlated to post-secondary earnings, college enrollment rates after high school, and college completion rates. There's no doubt the investment makes a difference. Next slide, please. So I'm here today to overview quite a few number of STEM and CTE investments that total $64 million that the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment oversees. And following Dustin's presentation, if we were in person and we weren't in COVID times, we appropriately have some of our culinary arts students serve you some of the beautiful food that he was talking about. So there's lots of different amazing ways that you see STEM and CTE come to life in our schools, pre-K through 20. So what I'll highlight today are programs that really range in size and scope, everything from relatively small grants for first leg robotics to larger state-funded grants like CTE Revitalization and Career Pathways. And we know that together our state investments in STEM and CTE, coupled with our federal Perkins dollars, make a significant collective impact, both in the quality of programming and the access to programming across the state for our children in Oregon. Next slide, please. So this slide really helps to clarify the overall budget picture for CTE and STEM grants and programs. And as you can see, there are two sources of funds, general funds and federal funds. Our federal dollars to the Carl Perkins grant make up clearly the largest component, but they're insufficient alone for growth and sustainability. So it's important to note as well that there's no federal funding source for STEM programming and that all STEM grants are supported by general fund dollars. I want to also call out that in 2000, there were over 1,200 CTE programs in Oregon, and we have seen a marked decline, and we're steadily trying to rebuild through lots of different intentional investments, particularly over the last 5 years that have been made in Oregon around CTE and STEM. So I'm pleased to report that in 2019-2000, that number increased again to 1,000. So we're still getting close. But the investments we've made still have yet to get us to the place that we were in year 2000. I think that's an important marker for us to hold together. What we know is that the legislators' continued support of STEM and CTE is improving our students' experience in schools. It's making education more meaningful for the entire community, and that state funds foster opportunity, partnership, and economic vitality. We know that state funding has been critical to expanding STEM and CTE programs and providing opportunities for more students to have access all over our state, urban and rural places included. Next slide, please. So I'll talk next about our STEM and CTE regional network grants. These provide the backbone for funding for our regional STEM hubs. And our STEM hubs, as you know, have been in existence since 2013. This important investment supports our STEM hubs, which are multi-sector partnerships. They link local pre-K through 20 educators with representatives from workforce and economic development, community-based organizations and business, and together they work together to really help transform what STEM's teaching and learning look like in Oregon. We know that this $5 million backbone funding is instrumental to the collective impact that STEM hubs have across the state. And it's distributed among the hubs through a tiered approach that was determined by the Chief Education Office based loosely on the cost of living and geographic demographic size of region. A very small amount of these grants are also used for STEM programming, which help fill in gaps in regional STEM efforts. And these programming efforts are determined by each hub and are specific to regional needs. What we know from school year 2019, or biennium, this last biennium, is that STEM regional network grants are supporting 13 STEM hubs all across the state. And we see again and again that when students are shown real-world connections to learning material, when we give them opportunities to apply their knowledge outside of the classroom, they actively engage and light up. Next slide, please. So you'll see here, this is a map of where our 13 STEM hubs are located across Oregon. And again, these hubs build connections in a geographic region so that learners connect to STEM experiences early and often. And it really helps light up and ignite students' passions and interests in multiple fields. STEM hubs really help cultivate a widespread belief in Oregon that every student, regardless of where they live, deserve access to the learning experiences that inspire them to be innovators and prepare them to help solve the challenges that both today and tomorrow bring. They play important roles in Oregon across many ways. They help identify the strengths and needs in our communities. They bring together families, K-12 educators, our career technical education partners, higher ed, community-based organizations, and industry to promote in-school and out-of-school STEM experiences. They strategize very skillfully to maximize resources to fill STEM learning gaps. And they work creatively in their region to build shared social and economic prosperity through STEM access, interest, and attainment of skills, and especially students who are furthest from opportunity. Collectively, we know that our STEM Hub collaboratives are powerful models for cross-sector engagement, stewardship, and system improvement. Next slide, please. I'll talk next about CTE Revitalization grants. These are powerful and potent boosts, if you will, to our CTE effort across the state. And in this last biennium, ODE awarded 50 grants that resulted in increasing CTE opportunities for students in 55 small rural schools and 4 tribal communities across Oregon. We were really excited this last biennium to really target and get clear about who we were aiming to serve. And we knew for sure that it was important, given that since 2014, 2015, the largest increase in CTE access has been in urban schools, and our rural schools continue to see the slowest rate of CTE. We wanted to intentionally build from legislative intent and designed Revite grants that served as a response to the need to boost CTE in our rural communities. As such, we focused this biennium on providing support to smaller schools and schools, in fact, who received less than $1,000 in high school success funds, and to intentionally reach out and invite collaboration and investment to our 9 federally recognized tribes. We're proud to say that our Revitalization grant really helps target student engagement and success. It helps to ensure completion, leading to college and career preparation, and most importantly, really provides, again, that potential boost that's most needed to local and regional economic development and CTE program strength. A couple of stories that I can't help but put in there. Cove School District, for example, in Union County received $120,000 for what they call their school farm facelift. And what they did is they built a new greenhouse. They introduced high-tech materials in their greenhouse and trained their students on how to use hydroponics and 3D computing, etc. They started a farm-to-table program with local beef raised on the school farm, and they purchased a tractor and allowed students to receive their tractor safety license. We also have an example with our Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. They received money for a War Pony automotive school, a collaboration between the Jefferson County School District, Central Oregon Community College, and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs to provide training in basic automotive care and maintenance. So these CTE revitalization grants provide critical funding. They revitalize existing CTE programs that have been underfunded, and they help to support the initiation of new programs of study that align to industry needs, linked to high wage and high demand career opportunities, and are of high interest and relevance to learners. When you talk to our small schools, they could not be more delighted to receive this kind of funding and name that it made a marked difference in their ability to extend and expand their CTE offerings this last biennium. Next slide, please. Career Pathway Funding invests over about $8.5 million in incentivized CTE programs to offer students a chance to stretch a little higher in their program work and attainment. And it really incentivizes students to earn the 3rd credit and, where applicable, industry credentials, such as Microsoft certifications or American Welding Society certification, et cetera. That's part of a CTE program of study. So what we know is that when students attain this 3rd credit, it assists with graduation completion. It leaves them better equipped to succeed in college and career following their secondary experience. And it serves as a really powerful gateway to further learning and further opportunity as they enter in opportunities after post-secondary study. We know that this particular grant program is especially important because more than half of the students it serves are historically underrepresented or served by CTE programs. And we're proud to say that more than 50% of students who benefited from this particular grant were identified as underserved by the system. Overall, in school year 2021, these outcome-based incentive grants offered between $2,000 and $45,000 per CTE program and benefited over 600 CTE programs in the state of Oregon. And this is particularly exciting. We almost doubled the credentials earned the previous year. So students in Oregon earned 675 credentials in school year 19 and 20 as a result of this incredible Career Pathways investment. Next slide, please. I'll talk next about our STEM innovation grants. The purpose of these grants are to really expand implementation of effective programming related to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The purpose, of course, is to really inspire innovative approaches to STEM-based education and or to provide professional development related to STEM fields and areas of interest. So these formula grants are set up by recommendation by the STEM Investment Council, and the current focus has really been on after-school programs, computer science, and mathematics. And this biennium, we've been able to also fund additional innovative programming efforts through some of these funds. In 1921 biennium, 14 programs were funded by the STEM innovation grants and were implemented around the state. So programs includes math and science professional development, STEM student leadership, computer science district planning, and school-wide STEM transformation. A couple little samples of what that looks like is STEM hubs have collaborated to provide what they call STEM bites. They're not edible, but they are a set of free lessons for teachers in grades K-6. STEM hubs have also built and distributed thousands of take-home STEM kits. I can tell you because my 13-year-old son was the beneficiary of one, and it was a highlight of his CDL experience. So these have been really helpful, particularly as students have been learning from home much of this year. And
Patterson?
Yes.
I have to take 5 minutes to work on the work session. And
You bet. Co-Chair Frederick, Co-Chair McLean, members of the committee, thank you for the record. Rick Krager, Assistant Superintendent, Finance Information Technology. Again, we are continuing our grant and aid. We will be starting on slide 106. I believe Jennifer's going to do a quick review. That's where she was at when we cut off, and then she will move into slide 107. So that will be our starting place today. Just as a quick recap to everybody, we are in the middle of our grant and aid section. You might recall there are 6 subcategories. This is the third one, which is our STEM and CTE related grant programs. As Cindy already alluded to, we're hoping to get to the 4th and 5th one today, which will pretty much get us through most of the grant aid with just one more subsection left. So with that, and without further ado, I will introduce Ms. Patterson to come back and finish up her presentation as it relates to STEM and CTE, excuse me.
Very helpful, and if you would once again reintroduce yourself, that would help too.
Absolutely. Co-chairs Frederick and McLean and members of the committee, for the record, I'm Jennifer Patterson, Assistant Superintendent of the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment. It's a delight to be here again with you today as we continue to highlight investments in Oregon students. For everybody's benefit, as Rick Krager named, I'm going to pick back up where we left off on Monday and provide just a brief overview of this slide of STEM innovation grants. So as you see here, STEM innovation grants have provided about $5 million of funding, and their purpose is really to expand implementation of effective programs related to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics that create innovative approaches to STEM-based education, or provide professional development relating to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So these are really critical formula grants, and the current focus has been on after-school programs, computer science, and mathematics. So with that, I'll go ahead and transition us to the next slide, please. So this slide really highlights kind of the so what of STEM innovation grants. Their effects are far reaching, and I'll highlight just a few of them here for you. As you can see, they make a really big difference for students and educators. Over 5,000 educators participated in professional learning programs because of these innovation grants. Equally noteworthy is almost 41% of students in Oregon have been impacted or influenced in some positive way by STEM professional developments opportunities for their teachers. Equally exciting is that this really draws in industry volunteers. So you can see here that over 2,000 industry volunteers participated in these activities, really taking an active role in deepening the expertise at the table around STEM opportunities for students. And 43,000 students participated collectively in these programs. We also know that almost 1,000 teachers benefited in some way from equipment loaning. Anybody who's been around any kind of science or technology experiences know that equipment is vital. So all told, these STEM innovation grants, they reach a lot of students, they reach a lot of educators, and they make a really big difference. Next slide, please. What I'm going to talk about next are our student leadership organization grants related to CTE, and they often are called CTSOs. So I'll try to use as few acronyms as possible so that we can make as much meaning together as possible. But these CTSOs are really important. They strengthen CTE programs, and they also invest in student leadership. So you might commonly think about this when you think about FFA. It's probably the most broadly and well known of our career and technical student organizations in Oregon. Overall, through CTSOs, students have really important opportunities. They get to serve in leadership positions, they work collaboratively in teams, they generate ideas, they problem solve, they get to develop vision and their own self-efficacy. So they have really lasting impacts for students. And this particular grant supports Oregon's chartered CTSOs. This includes Future Business Leaders of America, Health Students of America, Technology Students of America, and one that I'm particularly excited about, Educators Rising for future educators. We know that in this last grant cycle, ODE provided awards to 327 CTSO chapters and reached approximately 13,000 students statewide. So again, a small amount of investment for a large felt impact for students. Next slide, please. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more specifically. I mentioned FFA briefly before. So FFA have received 2 grants that I'll feature and talk about today. And FFA is an example of one of Oregon's CTSOs. It is a dynamic youth organization. It helps to change lives. It prepares members for leadership, personal growth, and career success through Oregon opportunities in agricultural education. And it's influenced and positively affected nearly 12,000 students in Oregon. So House Bill 2444 really enabled and created additional funding for Oregon FFA. And the purpose there was to expand services for students who were historically underserved by the system and helping to reduce financial barriers and thereby increasing outreach efforts and bringing more students in to join FFA. Additionally, Oregon FFA Association initiated 8 new programming elements through this funding that really, again, helped to pull more students in, focusing specifically on 9th graders, students historically underserved by the system, and first-year FFA members. So a few key programming elements that I will highlight. One, they created new curriculum resources for teachers to focus on personal and interpersonal group leadership for first-year FFA members. They also were intentional about creating more opportunities for their summer regional leadership camps for historically underserved students to attend. And they created opportunity connections virtually for virtual sessions and virtual lunch and classroom drop-ins, again, for students new to FFA to increase participation and outreach. So as a result, Oregon FFA Association membership has grown immensely. It's grown from 7,500 students to nearly 12,000. And it continues to have broad reach and influence as a leadership mechanism for developing Oregon's youth. Next slide, please. So this next component related to FFA is a smaller chunk of money, just about $600,000, but boy, is it important, because as anybody involved in agricultural seasons and cycles know, summer is a busy time of year. So this funding really helps make sure that money is available for activities, goals, and deliverables associated with FFA throughout the summer season. Specifically, it allows continuity of summer programming, and it essentially pays for teachers and educators to receive summer extended duty pay and contracts to continue to support students and support their projects and their learning. We know that a total of 51 teachers were able to participate as a result of these grant funds, and educators were really able to focus and prioritize supporting students and sustaining participation in FFA over the summer months. And this is in spite of COVID, and it really was a key component in sustaining participation and engagement. Next slide, please. I can't help it when I think about my days as an elementary principal and thinking and seeing our youngest students participating in Lego Robotics. And so this program is associated with robotics and provides experiences for students to really combine academic and technical skill and learning. It creates opportunities for them to collaborate with their peers in creating and learning more. And it really promotes agile thinking, innovation, and a good dose of healthy competition. So first grants were first implemented in the 2011-2013 biennium, and they really aim to inspire young people to become science and technology leaders, which we know we need more of. And they help engage them in exciting mentor-based programs that combine science, engineering, and technology skills. It also really brings in outside mentors in business and industry in some critical and supportive ways. In this past year, the first grants provided an opportunity for over 2,270 K-12 students on 293 teams in schools from 31 of 36 of Oregon's counties. Next slide, please. I'll last highlight our Perkins grant funds. These are federal dollars. As you can see from an earlier slide that I touched on Monday, Perkins dollars are a big deal in supporting CTE opportunities and funding in Oregon. Our Carl Perkins grants really also create a larger architecture of support, not only providing funding, but providing key guidance and framing to help educators initiate and continuously improve their CTE programs. The Perkins grant framework has been a really fundamental part of Oregon's CTE success and increase in CTE participation over the last decade. We estimate that.
Let me jump in just a second. I want to go back to the previous slide. I happen to enjoy. I encourage everyone on the committee to, if you get a chance to go to one of the first grant competitions, you will see not just folks who are dealing with technology, but a level of creativity that is extraordinary and just a lot of fun. When you see a whole group of folks who are dressed in special kinds of T-shirts and other things, as well as folks who are able to put together cheers for their team and all sorts of things. It is a very different and a lot of fun for a lot of kids who often in the past would have been left out. So I would encourage you to get a chance to go to the first competitions. They are just a lot of fun. I don't know if we're going to be able to have them this year, but in the future, try to stop by and see some of these programs. I'm sorry, I just enjoy that group quite a bit.
Co-Chair Frederick and members of the committee, no, appropriately applaud the cheering on of this program, and would echo your sentiment. I think, as I said, as an elementary principal, had the great privilege of watching students throughout their career in K-12 participate in Lego robotics, and would just strongly echo everything that you named. Thank you for sharing.
Please go ahead. I'm sorry, I just had to interrupt there.
No, absolutely fine. So I'll take us next to the following slide, please, if I may. So I'm going to pick back up and talk about Perkins funding. Again, just to highlight, this is a significant amount of funding. It provides ODE with support for about 160,000 students in CTE through about 300 high schools, 17 community colleges, 7 youth correctional facilities, and 1 adult correctional facility. So Perkins funds are distributed on a formula basis, and recipients submit an application to receive their funds. Oregon has an even split between funding for K-12 and higher education, so we partner with the HEC and our colleagues there around the execution of this program. And the funding is based on poverty and census data. So collectively, Oregon receives around $35 million for Perkins funds, which again is a primary sort of life source for funding our CTE programs. It's important to highlight here that the 2020-2021 school year is the first in which we've debuted our Perkins 5 plan. And that plan really aims to do the following things: to create tighter connection between workforce and employer needs, to increase the engagement with students, parents, community organizations, employers, as well as counselors, advisors, instructors, and administrators, all around what are high quality CTE and work-based learning experiences look like, sound like, and feel like. It also attempts to create statewide models for high quality programs of study available for schools and colleges to adopt, to create rich opportunities for students to gain real world experience and skills through work-based learning, which we know is really critical for students to help imagine and see themselves into their future. And lastly, career exploration, beginning at least in middle school and extending through adult education. We know that when our youngest students are able to learn about career opportunities and the changing landscape around what work might look like in their future, it really helps them not only create authentic purpose in their present schooling lives, but to connect and create goals that will bring them forward. So we know that CTE, as I named earlier on Monday, there are many research-based ways to connect CTE to student-based outcomes that are really clear to us, related to attendance and engagement, high school graduation, post-secondary success, post-secondary earnings, and college completion. Next slide, please. So this brings me to my final slide of this section, in which I just want to give an overview for the governor's recommended budget for the coming biennium. In that, the governor's budget outlines about $2 million, a little bit more than $2 million in CTE and STEM reductions. This is with the exception of CTE Revitalization program, as well as an additional reduction for the elimination of the CTE Student Leadership Organization grants. Additionally, the governor's recommended budget outlines a $500,000 reduction for the first program, as identified in the 2020 second special session. And these reductions were made in the second special session to balance the budget and move forward in the governor's recommended budget. Also want to highlight some important investments that the governor's budget outlines. One, an increase of $3 million for STEM programming for diverse learners, specifically designed to benefit and engage students who are historically and currently underserved in our care. And a new investment of $2 million in a Mathways program to support a collaborative regional network of mathematics teachers and leaders to help develop instructional materials and new courses that are really designed to help redesign the way we provide mathematics learning in our system that can often create barriers for students in their mathematical journey K-12. So thank you so much for your time today, for the opportunity to highlight these STEM and CTE investments. Collectively, as you can see, these investments acknowledge the tremendous impact that access to CTE and STEM has for all of Oregon students. And I welcome any questions you may have.
Are there any questions at this point?
Yes,
I see Senator Dembro's hand up, and there may be some more, but go ahead, Senator Dembro.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I was going to ask you about the Perkins program, but before we do, since we're on this slide still, where we see proposed reductions in CTE STEM as well as some increases, is there a rationale there for why reduce here and increase in the other? Is there some sort of policy reason for that we should be considering?
Co-Chair Frederick, Senator Dembro, thank you for that question, and certainly happy to entertain your question about Perkins in a minute. But first, I'll address your question around these reductions. And really what I can say is that the reductions that were made, again, in the context of the second special session, I think were hard decisions. Any decision, reducing these sorts of investments are difficult, and they, they're trade-offs. So I know that in thinking about places to reduce or eliminate, I think I think there was an effort to look at where there could be potentially limited amounts of felt impact. And what I know for sure in the governor's budget that really guided the governor in creating these investments was a deep belief in thinking about what can we design and do differently to ensure that more students have access to STEM learning and deep mathematics opportunities. And we know that that's an area of growth in Oregon and nationally to ensure that students, our Black students, our Indigenous students, our Latinx students, girls often have equal and amplified opportunity to participate in high quality STEM experiences, and to really look at how mathematics instructions and opportunities can be retooled to be more equitable across the state.
Thank you. And, just following up, I mean, at some point, it would be good to know just why those particular cuts, were made. And perhaps I don't know if that's a question for you or for the governor's office, or, how we can, best ascertain that.
Yeah, Co-Chair Frederick and Senator Dembro, I certainly can get back to you with any more information and care very much about making sure your question's addressed.
And Co-Chair Frederick, and if I may, Senator Dembro, to your question, again, sorry, Co-Chair Frederick, for the record, Rick Krager, Assistant Superintendent of Finance Information Technology. In terms of the reduction package that you do see there, the one thing I think, as Jennifer alluded to, these are essentially roll-up impacts to what the legislature had directed in August. So while certainly there are some trade-offs in this case, much of this in this particular policy package is rolling up the direction of the legislature in that case. So I just wanted to make sure that there was clear understanding that in this particular exercise, it was pretty much just following the directive of what had already been approved, as opposed to making a decision to arbitrarily reduce these particular programs. I hope that helps.
No, thank you, Rick. Yeah, that does help. I will say, though, just for me, some of those reductions that we approved during the special session, I think many of us thought of them as kind of short-term emergency sorts of needs, right? Not necessarily that we would want those programs to go away forever, right? Those investments. But it sounds as if anything that was cut to help balance the budget in the short term, did figure into the roll-up for the governor's budget
Co-Chair Frederick, Senator Denbrough, sort of. In the instructions related to the legislature, there were some reductions that were called out as permanent reductions, while others were called out as one-time. So what you will see in the governor's budget are only those ones that were called out as permanent reductions or eliminations. There were other examples, such you'll hear more about later, the chronic absenteeism grants that were one time in nature. So I think it depends.
Thank you. Okay, so going to my Perkins question, Jennifer, one of the, I think, strong features of the Perkins program is its requirement that schools have industry advisory committees. I know that's true in the community colleges and it's true in the high schools as well. I think that forming those kinds of relationships that you mentioned, I think are really important, making sure that the curriculum is relevant, et cetera, and potentially that there are pathways to employment for kids if they want to stay in the area and work in those fields. I'm wondering how do the districts report on how effective their industry advisory committees are? Are they kind of, hit or miss, in terms of, how regularly they meet, how robust they are, et cetera? And I ask that question partly because some years ago, I think we passed legislation that called on more of a regional approach to industry advisory committees that could potentially consolidate the community college industry advisory committees with the high school to have a more comprehensive look at these partnerships. Has there been progress on this, or do you have a sense of where we are?
Co-Chair Frederick and Senator Denbrough, thank you for that question. Here's what I do know, and then I can certainly address your question. I know that the value for advisory teams and advisory councils runs deep in Perkins 5, and I know that there is real interest in sort of re-energizing that conversation and honestly bringing more diversity to those advisory teams, both in different industries that are represented and who's at the table. I think there's a strong acknowledgement and commitment to making sure that the advisory councils that we create and that it really inform our programs of study are also reflective of the children that we are serving in Oregon and in our CTE program. So I definitely have been involved in those conversations. I at this point can't speak specifically to your question around how well are those district advisory teams doing. I said, are they hit or miss, and is there a report on that in any way? And I definitely know, as you alluded, I hear stories of the ones that are doing well, but I don't have any specific data that would really leave me well informed to answer your question with credibility. So what I will do is I'll loop back to our Director of Secondary Post-Secondary Transitions, Janelle Ives, and our incredible SPSTS team, and I'll see what more information I can provide in response to your question.
That's great. I'd welcome that, Jennifer. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Senator Denbrough.
Thank you, Senator. Co-Chair McLean, did you have something? I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Well, first of all, I have to make my one message of the year on STEAM and not just STEM, because I know that Jennifer loves all of the STEM programs. Well, there's a lot to be done still as far as adding some other skills that make the engineers be able to communicate with others, and to make sure that our mathematicians can explain their some of the different formulas and some of the work and some of the different elements of learning that they get in these programs. And so I do want to mention that. The FFA program that you love dearly, my brother was a star farmer and girls couldn't join FFA when I was a kid, but it's one of those things where I support all of those programs. I think they're fabulous, but again, remember that we're not perfect and we can always improve. So let's get a little STEAM in there and help those STEM folks out. and make sure that we're working on all kinds of communication. Creative thinking, as co-chair Frederick pointed out, is part of that, as well as critical thinking. And you have some different types of critical thinking strategies that you learn in some of these other classes, like speech and debate, and some of the other classes that you may include into DECA, but they actually are quite different. And so I just want to make that on the record. The other item before Doug has a fit, I want Senator Dembro to remember that our budget committee doesn't get to just be the we would like to do it all committee. We have to make sure that we are looking at programs and making sure we're getting transparent review. And so some of those $2 million of reduction, because we've been keeping in touch with the governor's office as well as ODE and others, and that is, thinking about which programs are the most productive, which programs are integrated right now with our Student Success Act buckets of funds and resources, and also which programs still have gaps and where we need to do more, or we may need to transfer dollars and or thoughts out there to try and see where we need to put the resources to make it more effective. And one of the items that I want to remind people about are the grants they love to start new STEM programs. And those types of grants have been successful, and maybe that needs a little more money, but we don't just want to keep going with the same program because we liked it when we started it. We want to make sure that it's efficient and effective and it's doing the right thing. Also, we have measures like Measure 98. And we have to, when we're looking at cuts, and we have to look when we're looking at balances to make sure that, again, we have the kind of integration with Measure 98 and the STEM classes and STEM support systems that we have in place. Some of them are unique and completely different. Others are very similar and need to be integrated more closely. So I think that's what we're reviewing. We're not reviewing just things we like or things that we want to continue, but also things that we can improve and that we can integrate on the ground. So I just wanted to make those statements as we're listening to some of the other programs and some of the other statements made by our financial experts. And I want to thank Jennifer for all the work she does in this area.
Thank you.
Co-chairs Frederick and McLean, Representative McLean, thank you very much for your comments and your generous feedback. I do want to tell you, we too believe in the A in STEAM, and I appreciate everything you said about that. Would also want to share with you that we were delighted to be awarded a $5 million grant just this year through the federal government for well-rounded learning opportunities. We'll be adding some staff and efforts in our department toward that end. So absolutely want to reinforce that those values for the arts and that well-rounded experience are values that we hold true and deep in the department as well.
Thank you.
Representative Levy, I believe your hand is up.
Thank you, co-chairs Frederick and McLean. I just want to echo what co-chair McLean said. So my 47-year-old son was one of the first students in Hermiston School District to participate in DECA. And so that set him forward on becoming, he owns his own business in California, but he has a master's degree in finance and really good at that. FFA is really big on my side of the state, really, really big. So I have to do a shout out for the city of Hermiston. Their FFA team won first in the state this year. The Imbler girls, it's an all girls FFA team. They got second in the state, and they did their presentation on elk depredation, which I have a work group started on. And then I have to also give a shout out to Phil Ward, who was just hired as the CEO of the FFA for the state. And then the other one is the robotics. I have two nephews who I thought were going to go nowhere, literally nowhere. They were always playing on their video games and all that other stuff, and they got hooked on that video. They started in the robotics program, and they both work for high-tech companies now in developing different types of robotics for surgeries and medical surgeries of the brain and technical things like that. And they're on the cutting edge of medical technology now. Who would have known that a robotics class in high school would have brought these kids that never had a conversation with us because they're too busy on their video games to being something that is going to prove to be pretty helpful for health and all that other kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm kind of tickled about all those programs now.
That's good. It's good to hear. Thank you, Representative Levy. Representative Alonzo Leon.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I have a couple questions, and thank you so much for your presentation, Director Patterson. The questions that I have are around the Perkins grant, since we're on that slide. It says here that you provide support to 7 correctional youth facilities. Are all of our, is that how many we have in total? And if it isn't, I guess my question is, why don't we have all of the correctional facilities being supported by this program? And then if our correctional facilities also, are they eligible to participate in the first grant program where they can also compete?
Co-Chair Fredericks and McLean, Representative Alonso Leon, thank you for these important questions. I know that not all correctional facilities are recipients of the Perkins Grant program, and in full transparency, I don't know why that is, but I certainly can find out. I know that $35 million, while on the surface sounds like a lot of money, it goes quickly, which is, one of the ways in which Measure 98 is really welcome additional resource in supporting CTE programming across the state. So I will certainly learn more about how those 7 were selected and what percentage in total are served, and definitely echo and appreciate the sentiment that I assume to be underneath that question, which is, if we know CTE makes a big difference, why don't we capitalize on that and leverage that investment more broadly to students and youth who arguably need the opportunity and deserve the opportunity the most. Can you remind me of your second part of your question?
Yes, it was related to the first grant program. Yes. If any of the students from the correctional facilities are eligible to participate in that competition, since it sounds like a very exciting opportunity to showcase one's talents and skills in CTE.
Yes, thank you, Representative Alonso Leon, for the reminder of the second part of your question. I don't believe that it is that the first grants are, I believe that they're eligible, the eligible recipients are districts. That's what I believe to know for sure. But again, I can verify that and get information around what the statute allows for in terms of allocation and who may be eligible. But I believe that the only K-12 districts are eligible for those first grant dollars. But happy to get more information on both of your questions. And thank you again for centering care and interest in supporting our youth that are served in correctional facilities.
If I may follow up.
Yes, follow up. Go ahead.
So the reason I ask is, we talk about our students who've made mistakes, right? In general, any students, if we want to center opportunities for them, we want to expand opportunities. This could be the thing that turns a student around, just like sports may be the thing that turns students around. And so, I played sports in school, and so it was a tiny bit competitive. And so, and I also was involved with Smile. Well, we also had a bridge building competition where we took our bridges to OSU. And so these kinds of events and opportunities really kept me going and exposed me to post-secondary education. I saw myself at OSU at one point when I didn't think that was a thing for me. Excuse me. So when I think about these kind of opportunities, I think about our youth, our kids, and what impacts their lives, what opportunities will impact their life that will change their life in a way that we didn't envision it for them, but they see themselves. And so I just, for these students in correctional facilities, we can, in some respects, marginalize them by not exposing them to opportunity. So I just, I hope that if there's a possibility for them to have access to this opportunity to compete and share their skills, let's do it if possible. So I just want to put that out there as an access and equity-centered program that we want to be able to expose all students regardless of their background and experience and the fact that they made mistakes, but we can create opportunities for them too, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. Thank you.
Co-chairs Frederick and McLean and Representative Alonso, if I may, I just want to respond briefly to that, because I think not only the joy and the emotion that you reflected so vulnerably and so beautifully, Representative Alonso Leon, is so telling about the value that these kinds of experiences have for children. They truly change the trajectory of children's lives. And so I just want to echo both your energy, Representative Levy's energy, the energy that these conversations around STEM and CTE and STEAM inspire in adults comes from our own touchstones to these programs. And it comes from direct experiences that we've had, as you so beautifully shared, and people that we know and love have had, as we heard from Representative Levy so powerfully. So just appreciate the time and space to think about the investments we make that really not only spark joy for children and deep purpose, but help to create a longer storyline and arc of who our children see themselves becoming in the future. It's so critical. Thank you for your advocacy, Senator Alonso Leon.
We're now going to move back to the agency presentation on Senate Bill 5513. I'd ask that the agency come forward and make its presentation, and please be sure to say for the recording your name, title, and agency. And I think we start off with Cindy Hunt. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Co-Chair Frederick. Co-Chair Frederick, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Cindy Hunt. I'm the Chief of Staff for the Oregon Department of Education. So we are starting in again today on our grant and aid section of the presentation, and with Jennifer Patterson, who's one of our assistant superintendents. And then if we have time, we'll also begin today with Scott Nine, who is another assistant superintendent, for us to go over some of the other grant and aid programs. You did ask us a couple of questions in our last meeting, and we're still gathering information to respond to those questions, so we haven't submitted a response yet, but we anticipate that we will be doing that on Wednesday. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick Krager to facilitate going through the grant and aid section of our presentation.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Cindy. Good afternoon, Co-Chair Frederick, Co-Chair McLean, members of the committee. For the record, Rick Krager, Assistant Superintendent, Finance and Information Technology. Good to be with you again today. As Cindy said, we're going to continue into our grant and aid section. We are into the 5th subcategory, as you might remember, the student achievement grants. And when we last left you, Assistant Superintendent Jennifer Patterson was speaking to you, and I believe on slide 23, which was our Accelerated College Credit Instructor Grant Program, is where we left off. And with that, I would welcome Jennifer back to begin this. And she's got about 3 slides left. And then if we have a chance, we will get into Assistant Superintendent Scott Nye to finish up the balance of that particular subsection.
And for those who are looking at the meeting materials, that's slide 23 of the presentation number 3, as I recall. And it is you can find those presentations in OLAS under the March 3rd committee meeting materials. So that's a little bit convoluted, but if you go to OLAS, go to March 3rd in the committee meetings and look at the meeting materials, you'll find it in that batch there, and the third group of meeting materials for this particular committee. All right?
And Co-Chair Frederick, let me apologize. I believe Jennifer is actually going to start one slide back on slide 22. My mistake on that.
No problem.
And with that, I'll bring on Jennifer.
Thank you. And Co-Chair Frederick, apologies. I think you actually had it on the right slide. So one slide forward. Apologies for the...
Okay.
There we go. All right. Co-Chair Frederick and McLean, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Jennifer Patterson, Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment with the Department of Education, and delighted to join you again here today to continue to highlight investments in Oregon students. I'll start by talking about the Accelerated College Credit Instructor Grant Program, and this program builds capacity for accelerated college credit programs by providing grants to school districts, ESDs, community colleges, public post-secondary institutions, all to provide education or training for teachers who then build their capacity and in turn earn the appropriate credentials to teach and offer dual credit courses. And we know that dual enrollment is currently one of the most utilized pathways for students to receive college credit while in high school. Currently in Oregon, the vast majority of public high schools across the state provide students with the opportunity to earn college credit while still in high school. Our most recent available data from HEC from school year 2018-19 reflects the following. As many as 26% of Oregon students in 11th and 12th grade have participated in some kind of dual enrollment program. Among school year 2018-19 high school graduates who enrolled in community college for fall of 2019, students had earned an average of 16.4 community college credits while still in high school. And among the 2018-19 graduates from public universities, those that entered with at least 10 accelerated learning college credits graduated an average of half a year sooner than those entering with less than 10 accepted accelerated learning credits. And this pattern holds for all racial and ethnic groups. So we know that this program is especially important as well to our rural communities. It helps to increase the offerings of credit granting courses where they can often be limited. This program has helped teachers from 9 different educational service districts get the coursework they needed to be able to teach college credit offering courses in their high schools. And this program was eliminated for the 2021 school year through the second special session of 2020. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk next about our Regional Promise Grants. At its core, the Regional Promise Grants are really intended to increase the number of high school students that complete college courses and the number of high school teachers eligible to teach those courses. At the core, the 5 pillars of the Regional Promise Grants are equity, building a college-going culture, expanding accelerated college credit, fostering cross-sector partnerships, and deepening professional learning communities. So these Regional Promise Grants are competitive, and they're intended to develop or expand the consortia of education service districts, school districts, and post-secondary institutions to create additional opportunities for high school students to participate and earn credit in college-level courses. Each consortium plans to serve at least 10,000 students, or 50% or more of the 5th through 12th grade students in school districts that are participating. These grants include at least 1 Oregon public post-secondary institution, at least 3 school districts, and at least 1 educational service district. Some important aspects of this grant include how it brings college teachers and high school teachers around the same table, collaborating and working together to talk about what's the most essential learning for our students. It increases the number of percentage of students taking accelerated courses, and we know that there are more students taking accelerated courses in Regional Promise schools than in non-Regional Promise schools. We also know that the Regional Promise courses serve higher percentages of students experiencing navigating poverty, and also our students of color. In 1921, a total of 9 grants were awarded, 2 to community college and 7 to ESDs. And this program was eliminated for 2020-21 during the 2020 special session in order to balance the budget. Next slide, please. These physical education grants are competitive grants. They support our K-8 schools in Oregon by providing additional funding to hire licensed PE teachers and to provide professional development for them. Schools from across the state have utilized these funds, and many are from rural parts of our state and navigating high rates of poverty. So physical education matters everywhere. Quality physical education is associated with improved physical, mental, social, and emotional health. We know that PE improves concentration and focus, it increases academic success, and it helps spark joy and engagement for our students. Collectively, these physical education grants invest $4.5 million to help ensure students have more physical activity and better wellness, a focus that matters more now than ever. This grant is supported by a combination of general funds and the tobacco tax, and it's an investment that helps 24 districts all across Oregon. I have a couple of testimonials, one from Medford School District. They say, with assistance from this grant, our school is able to hire a licensed physical education teacher to provide quality physical education to all of our students throughout the year. The PE teacher not only helped to improve the physical and mental health of our students, but also helped our staff and community to become more active. We greatly appreciated the funding and have found more permanent funding for our physical education teachers in the future. Thank you. Greater Albany says, equity is a huge part of this equation. Some schools don't have PE teachers because they're smaller and there aren't as many discretionary funds. It is important that all schools receive targeted funding for physical education so that every child at every school has an equal opportunity to receive quality physical education. So in close, co-chairs Frederick and McLean and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. I'm happy to address any questions you may have before turning it over to Scott Nine, Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Education, Innovation, and Improvement.
Please go ahead, Scott. I don't see any questions at this point. Go ahead.
Co-chairs Frederick and McLean and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Scott Nunn and I'm humbled to serve as the Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Education, Innovation, and Improvement. This new office was established in July 2019 with the passage of the Student Success Act. I joined ODE full-time in a new role in September 2019. And in October of 2019, ODE completed an organizational rebalancing that put several of the key programs I'll present to you about alongside each other in this new office with the goals of increasing alignment and coordination. I'll begin reporting to you today program by program. We won't get through all of the slides that I have to cover and carry forward from my colleague Jennifer Patterson, but I would like to note that the EII staff have developed a shared vision for the office as a whole, have and continue to do a lot of work to build increased alignment and coordination amongst the programs that I'm going to present to you in a distinguished way, and that we're continuing to build tools and processes that center racial equity and create easier pathways for information to flow between the department and these different programs in rural and urban settings and with districts and charter schools, as well as with community partners and Oregon's 9 sovereign nations. To the best of my knowledge, each of these programs have been implemented with fidelity and a lot of integrity amidst the challenges and impacts of COVID-19. The slide in front of you is the first program I'll report on. You see it listed as chronic absenteeism grants. Within the department, we refer to this program as Everyday Matters. A 2016 report on chronic absenteeism in Oregon was put together in a collaboration between Portland State University, the Coalition of Communities of Color, and what was then called the Chief Education Office. And it offered several key findings, which I think are relevant and important to share today, especially amidst what's happening in schools related to COVID-19. One finding was that parents and families are consistent in saying that they want a better life for their children and that they see high school graduation as a key to that better life. And that the report challenges the common perception that when children miss school or aren't engaged, it's a sign that their parents don't care. Students in the report voiced considerable desire for improved relationships with their teachers. The majority of students indicated that they wanted better relationships with their teachers, even when they said they don't actually care what happens at school. The literature on what we call chronic absenteeism consistently recommends a holistic approach that accounts for all of the context of a student's life. For this approach, accountability and intervention for chronic absenteeism becomes everyone's responsibility, including the student, the family, the school, the community, the district, and the state. The more barriers that students of color have, the more they need culturally specific organizations to help represent them and help them navigate the system. That's another finding in the report. And the last one I'll call your attention to for today is that we really can't examine absenteeism as a microcosm of the student, but rather a reflection or a symptom of larger systemic concern. This original 2016 suggests that school-based disengagement factors and failures to meaningfully engage students and families contribute to what we call chronic absenteeism. That same year, the legislature passed House Bill 4002 to spur program plan development rooted in the findings of that report. That plan development led to this actual grant and grant implementation, which only began in full in the 2018-19 school year. The implementation efforts have three areas of focus: statewide messaging and awareness campaigns, work with a regional-based entity, in this case, the Oregon Association of Education Service Districts, and targeted support to school districts with the highest rates of chronic absenteeism. The goal in all of those efforts is to approach a capacity building effort, trying to link the ESD's school districts, schools, and communities together with a focus on engaging students and families. If you'll go to the next slide, please. This map shows our best understanding of where students were chronically absent, or you might think of them as most disengaged, based on data pre-COVID-19 data collections. That's the best information that we have. Regular attendance is one of the indicators in our state accountability systems, and we calculate regular attendance based on data that we get from the start of the school year through May 1st in data collections that come to the state. You previously heard from Director Colt Gill, and I think covered the definition of chronic absenteeism, but just as a rough reminder, the way that our state defines that is for students who are missing 10% or more of the total number of days enrolled during the school year. It includes excused absences, unexcused absences, out-of-school suspensions, and in-school suspensions. A student who's been enrolled for the first 30 school days at the beginning of the school year and has been absent 3 of those days is functionally chronically absent under this definition. Again, chronic absence is not an outcome, but an indicator that interventions are necessary to address the barriers to being fully immersed in learning. Next slide, please. This slide talks about how the grant was administered for the 1921 biennium. You'll note that work was happening directly with school districts for targeted support. Regional work with OASD was happened at kind of a broader level, and then we did this kind of broad range, what we think of as kind of a universal type of support. You can see the resources that were moved in that first year as $3.2 million. And then you'll note that in the second special session, that August session, Senate Bill 5723 responding to COVID-19, the Everyday Matters program was suspended for the second year. It says eliminated, but I think suspended is a better word to describe that, because it's essentially put on hold, although that had the impact of winding down all the regional capacity builders and supports with OASDs. We were able to work with school districts for their part, but we basically had to kind of narrow down and shutter significant parts of this program, so they're not operating at this moment in time, though we did maintain the couple of staff at the department who work on this program, and it is put forward in the governor's recommended budget to resume, and that creates some opportunities. Next slide, please. These are some outcome highlights from the work that was accomplished so far. A major focus of this work has been to evaluate school and district systems and really look at how do you change mindsets and approaches in the way that staff respond to and engage to students and families. It's also included learning from successful implementation of the Tribal Attendance Promising Practices program. You heard my colleague Jennifer Patterson the last time you met talk about that program, and there are direct connections between what's being learned there and what can be offered to the system more broadly here. After a year of planning and implementation, the best kind of formal data results we have is that implementation coincided with a stopping of what was previously a 1% year-by-year increase of chronic absenteeism rates. This slide tells you some of the kind of detail stories about that. A couple other pieces. School districts that received direct support from ODE through grants and coaches, and school districts that received support through the regional consortia through the Oregon Association of Education Service Districts did show improvement in their chronic absenteeism rates in the 2018-2019 school year. Of those 91 school districts, 58% of them had a decrease or saw stabilization in their chronic absenteeism rates. At the same time, you'll want to know that the districts who got the most intensive support received that support, but we don't show a numeric impact or improvement in chronic absenteeism from 1 year of implementation, although we have some anecdotal evidence that people share in terms of the benefits of the program. I know we're almost at time. If I can say one last statement before I close.
Sure. Go right ahead.
On this topic.
Yes.
This will close out the chronic absenteeism grant section, and the next time I'm with you, we'll move to a different program. But I want to just say there is significant work to address the kinds of needs outlined in that original 2016 report, and especially now to face the realities of COVID-19. And as I mentioned, there are significant opportunities. Chronic absenteeism is embedded as things to focus on in both the high school success program and in the student investment account. And I see real value in maintaining some dedicated resources to address these root issues of student disengagement that result in chronic absenteeism, while using the suspension of this program as an opportunity to do some adjustment and recalibration of our efforts that can then kind of benefit across those other programs. I'll stop there for now, knowing I took up all the time for questions, but we'll be with you again next time.
Well, I hope, are there any questions at this particular point? Because we do need to move on, and we'll come back to this presentation or to another presentation on the student achievement grants and high school success grants. So is there anyone from the committee that has a question burning right now? I don't see any. Oops, yes, I see you. Representative Reschke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask my question, I think, on Wednesday, so we have some time to explore this, because this is a real key issue on graduation rates. If you have an absenteeism that is so high, there's no way you can reach graduation rates that make any sense. So I'll hold my question, but I'd like to ask it on Wednesday if possible.
Great. Oh, absolutely you can. That sounds like a good question to ask. Thank you. So I'm going to, because of that, because we're out of time, I'm going to, any other committee members with questions? No? Okay, that's fine. I'm going to close this public hearing on Senate Bill 5513. Any announcements from any of the subcommittee members? And does LFO have any announcements that you can tell us on what's the agenda for our next meeting?
Mr. Chair, members, we'll have a public testimony again on Wednesday for the K through 12 area. That generally generates quite a bit of public testimony. If there is time like there was today, we'll come back to the agency presentation and follow through here where we left off. And then Monday of next week, we'll come back to the agency and hopefully finish ODE on next Monday if we're lucky.
Sounds like a good plan. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, all the committee members for being here and for the questions and your attentiveness. Did I get that right? I did, I think. Anyway, I want to thank you for being here, and we will see you on Wednesday at 1 o'clock, and this will conclude the subcommittee's business for today. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Take care.